Hey, good evening. Welcome. Happy to be with you all again in our 22nd class. Um, let's go ahead and start with some prayers as usual. Do the praise to Shakyamuni Buddha once. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. And the short mandala offering. This ground anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. Refuge in Bodhicitta in English and then twice in the Tibetan. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Sangye chodang soki choknam la, jangchu bardu dakni kyabsu chi, daki chanyan gipe sanam gi, Dola Panchir Sangye Druparsho Sangye Chodang Soki Choknam La Jangchu Bardu Dakni Kyabsu Chi Daki Chanyan Gipe Sanam Gi Dola Panchir Sangye Druparsho. Right, then let's do a short meditation. Spend the first few minutes, as usual, just focusing on the breath to calm the mind. And then I'll come in and lead you in a short meditation to set our motivation together. So I'll ring the chime here to start. So now let's set our motivation. Recall that in the last class, we began this section where we're looking at to whom this Tathagata essence was taught, and looking at it primarily from the point of view of those beings who are still blind to that reality. And the largest category there is ordinary beings, sentient beings who, due to their own afflictions, especially the ignorance that is grasping at a self of persons, what we call the view of the transitory collection, these sentient beings are completely blind to reality. In fact, most of them do not even question the nature of things. They take for granted that the way that things appear is exactly how they exist. And we ourselves are still under the control of our own ignorance, our own erroneous views. But at least we have met with these teachings that reveal to us the emptiness of the mind, the emptiness of all phenomena. So while we have this opportunity, while we have met with this profound teaching of the Buddha, it's important that we have the proper motivation for continuing our study here again tonight. And we think that we're doing this for those countless beings who still do not have access to the truth. And even those who are already kind of, working with the truth but have not yet actualized the full result. All beings who are not yet Buddhas, we hold as the primary target, the main motivation for why we're here, for their welfare, for their benefit, so we can help every one of them discern reality and eventually attain Buddhahood. But of course, to do this perfectly, we need to be enlightened ourselves. So in conjunction with that mind that aspires to be a benefit to all sentient beings, we generate the wish to become a Buddha as the means to accomplish that goal. And having gratitude that we have met with these teachings that will help us to actualize our own potential. We do that. We have that strong intention to become a Buddha through using these teachings so that we then can help others, introduce them to the nature of reality, guide them on the path. So hold this motivation for being here tonight as we continue our study of this profound topic and profound text. Okay, and then when you're ready, open your eyes fully and we'll begin. So again, we started this section that's on page 205 about the consciousness that perceives the basic element. Again, the beings who actually have that awareness that is discerning what the nature of our minds is, the emptiness of inherent existence of our minds. And as I said, it started off with this little section on page 205 that was just essentially recapping verse 27 that we saw many moons ago. So the idea again is that the Buddha taught the Tathagata essence so that we could discern this reality, this truth. And in verse 27, he said, because the activities of the Dharmakaya are pervasive, because Buddhas are generating their enlightened activities for all beings, pervading the realms of space. And also B, line B, because suchness is undifferentiable, because the emptiness of our minds is the same as the emptiness of a Buddha's mind, the emptiness of all phenomena, exactly the same. And because of having the lineage, the developmental lineage, having a mind that can change, of course, because of its emptiness. And then the last line, all sentient beings always have the Buddha essence. So that even though this is the reality, nonetheless, there are beings who are still obscured to that reality. So we began that section, the verses that pertain to that on page 206, where we looked at verse 154, the first two lines. Let me go ahead and put that on the screen, kind of get us back into the material. And that's right here. We see that That line, those two lines say the ultimate essence of the self-arisen is to be realized through faith. Now, this is talking in particular about those beings who have not yet developed the reasoning consciousness that analyzes for emptiness. So as it says there in that commentary, the natural emptiness or the ultimate truth of the self-arisen here again is referring to, as it says in the last line, Buddhas who attained complete enlightenment in their last lives as bodhisattvas without relying upon other masters. Even though we frequently use that term self-arisen for the Pratyeka Buddhas, the solitary realizers, here it's being used to refer to the Buddhas. So they're saying that that is to be understood through faith and not through reasoning. By who? By hearers and solitary realizers. And this is not all hearers and solitary realizers. This is those who have not yet found the meaning of emptiness, who are practicing perhaps lower tenets and are not yet getting to that conclusion. Some ordinary beings, because there are even some ordinary beings, as we're going to see in the next page, who do have some conceptual realization of emptiness. And we talked about that previously, those bodhisattvas who are sharp faculty, who generate an awareness of that prior to entering the path. So this is generally when we say ordinary beings, we're meaning those beings who have not yet entered a path. And then by some beings who have newly entered the path, meaning bodhisattvas who have newly entered the path. Remember, we'll get to that in a moment. It's primarily those on the path of accumulation. Okay, so now we finished that, and we're on to the second two lines of verse 154. Just as when the sun shines, those who are blind will not see it. So again, if you put those two lines together into the verse, the ultimate essence of the self-arisen is to be realized through faith. Just as when the sun shines, those who are blind will not see it. So again, if you have some obscuration to seeing the nature of reality, it's the same as if you were blind and the sun rays were all around you and you couldn't discern the light. So it says here, the sun may shine, but those without eyes will not see it. Similarly, this reality is not something to be readily seen by the four kinds of beings that were just mentioned, in the same way as they would see form by simply opening their eyes. Some explain the first half of this verse as meaning that those of Mahayana lineage also realize the ultimate truth merely through following scripture or through faith. And the second half is meaning that the four types of beings never realize it. This is wrong, as will be shown later. Again, some Mahayanas will be able to certainly discern reality. It's not that all those of the Mahayana lineage only see it through faith, only discern it that way. And of course, the concept that any being would never realize it, that wasn't taught in the final teaching of the Buddha. All sentient beings have the capacity to realize emptiness. It's just a matter of the conditions and what they create from their own side that allows them to actually achieve that realization. So again, there's not really a whole lot more in regard to that verse. You get to the bottom of the page, and we have a short presentation that's a part of the commentary. Sometimes, again, I don't read these sections that have the connection to scripture, but this one I think I'm going to go ahead and read. It says, this is from the Srimala Devi Sutra. Remember that sutra? We mentioned it many moons ago as well. It was in our text that was mentioned as the source of some of these. It says, and begins Bhagavan, the Tathagata essence. The ordinary beings include not only those who cling to self and mind, who do not understand subtle emptiness, but also those who have not actually entered the paths of the three lineages. So again, it can include all those beings who are, again, clinging to self and mind still and haven't yet developed any of the wisdom that is realizing emptiness, even in a conceptual manner. And of course, those who haven't yet entered the hearer, solitary realizer, or bodhisattva paths. Similarly, the hearers and solitary realizers have merely understood the 16 coarse aspects of the Four Truths, but they have not understood subtle no self. Again, that's not all hearers and solitary realizers. One thing to remember, and we did go through this previously, it's going to come up again, that there are those hearers and solitary realizers that based on their tenets are only realizing the coarser view of a self of persons. And again, if you've studied the course on tenets in the basic program, everyone except Prasangika Madhyamaka, the school that we're studying, that is the highest view, Every single tenet system says that you can be free from samsara. You can achieve liberation merely through this coarser view of a self. Of course, it's not considered coarse by them, it's considered subtle, but it's coarse according to Prasangika Madhyamaka. They say you have to realize the lack of inherent existence of the I, not the lack of it being self-sufficient, substantially existent. So again, recall that those hearers and solitary realizers that practice those tenets observe the aggregates in the self, and they come to the conclusion about the four aspects that pertain to the true sufferings: impermanence, suffering, selfless, and pure, or and impure. Sorry, or pure. I'm sorry, pure, impure. What did I say? Okay, so we have those four again: impermanent, suffering, impure, and selfless. When they say selfless, though, they don't mean lacking inherent existence. They mean that the person, again, lacks the status of being self-sufficient and substantially existent. We've talked about this previously, so I'm not going to revisit all of those teachings. So again, those beings who are hearers and solitary realizers who are achieving or seeking to achieve their own liberation, their own state of arhatship, will possibly, if they only have run into those tenets, try to do so through those coarser realizations. But those don't get you there. The thing that will get you there is the realization of the lack of inherent existence of the person. Because again, that's the same lack of inherent existence with regard to all phenomena. But so what's being spoken of here are those who are practicing essentially erroneous views. Not erroneous in the sense that there's something the Buddha didn't teach, but erroneous in the sense that they aren't the actual means to accomplish liberation, self-liberation. All right. So we're going to see those folks come up when we talk about these four groups of beings. So again, that is two of the groups: the hearers and the solitary realizers. The last sentence in that top paragraph, it says, bodhisattvas who have newly entered the path also do not realize subtle emptiness, which is made very clear later on. Again, we're primarily talking here, I guess we could say not exclusively, because some may realize it before the bodhisattva path, and of course also realize it on the path of accumulation. But recall that when we have this chart, we see that actually when you have this point D, where you go from the path of accumulation to the path of preparation, if you have newly entered the bodhisattva path, how do you do that? If we scroll down a little bit, we see that that point D is where you have a union of calm abiding and special insight observing emptiness, right? You're observing emptiness still in a conceptual mode, but you have a very powerful mind that is the union of calm abiding and special insight, the stable and penetrating minds that have been united, observing emptiness. So you have to have the correct view of emptiness to go from the path of accumulation to the path of preparation. You cannot go any further. If you were a Chitta Matran, for example, practicing the view of mind only in terms of emptiness, you could never exit from the path of accumulation to the path of preparation without refining your view to the Prasangika Madhyamaka view of emptiness. So essentially, we're talking about bodhisattvas on the path of accumulation. And not all of them, because again, some of them will have realized emptiness conceptually, even prior to the path. But that's the main thing that they have to get through in order to kind of cross this bridge, to go from the path of accumulation to the path of preparation. All right. So then the next sentence in the next paragraph, it may be wondered, these particular beings of hearer and solitary realizer lineage are ordinary beings, right? You know, they're not Aryas yet. They haven't realized emptiness according to Prasangika Madhyamaka, so they can't be Aryas. They're ordinary beings. And it has already been explained that ordinary beings do not realize the Tathagata essence. Therefore, isn't it being taught here that hearer and solitary realizer Aryas also do not directly realize suchness? In other words, those who've gained the status of being called an Arya, that somehow they've done that through a lesser realization. And that's not, of course, what Prasangika Madhyamaka teaches at all. You only attain the status of Arya on the basis of realizing the Tathagata essence, the emptiness of inherent existence of the mind of all phenomena. Okay. Well, in that case, Gyaltsab says there would be no point in singling out bodhisattvas who have newly entered the path as examples of those who have not realized it, because they too are ordinary beings, right? Because you know they are in the same category, right? They So it says here, the above is teaching that generally these four types of beings do not realize the Tathagata essence suchness, devoid of elaboration. It is not saying that every ordinary being does not realize it, because there are ordinary beings who perfectly understand emptiness. Here, going back to that chart, remember that when we talk about the factors that lead you to enter into the Mahayana path, and this again isn't delineated here, it's on another version of this chart, but essentially the factors that feed into your entering the Mahayana path are great compassion, the mind of enlightenment, which of course is bodhicitta, which needs to be there in a stable form to enter into the Mahayana. And then for those sharp facultied bodhisattvas, they have to realize some level of non-dual awareness, which means some understanding of emptiness. Again, they won't have a direct realization of emptiness, because unless they were someone who completed the Hinayana path prior, they have not entered a path and realized emptiness directly. The initial point of doing that is always the path of seeing, whether it be on the path of seeing of the Hinayana or the Mahayana. That's the initial time that you have a direct realization of emptiness. So again, these are ordinary beings. Some ordinary beings have realized the kind of meaning of suchness. They haven't had a direct realization, but they've had a conceptual realization that has brought them to the correct meaning. Because we're not talking about direct realization here. That's going to be brought up soon as well. I think even possibly in the next paragraph. So let's carry on. Again, we're just trying to delineate who are these four groups of beings who have not yet seen the Tathagata essence. That's it right there. It says, if not realizing meant not directly realizing, then there would be no point in the qualification newly entering the path, right? Because having entered the Mahayana path, the bodhisattva who practices for many great eons to reach the forbearance and supreme Dharma stages, those are the last two of the path of preparation, is an ordinary being who still has not directly realized emptiness, right? So if we're just talking ordinary beings and Aryas, then it's very easy to delineate. Therefore, who are these beings who do not realize the suchness of Tathagata essence with defilement? Now, they should be understood as beings of the three lineages, qualified as above. Again, here are solitary realizers and bodhisattvas that we've qualified, and then plus some other ordinary beings. These are the four groups that are going to be correlated to what is obscuring them. We're going to see that coming up soon. Then finally, to conclude this section, if the commentary were teaching that hearer and solitary realizer Aryas did not realize suchness at all, this would contradict understanding through faith, as explained above, right? Because they still do have some understanding through faith. They just have not yet generated the reasoning mind, the analysis that will help them to know and discern emptiness as it is correctly known according to Prasangika Madhyamaka. Because here and solitary realizer Aryas definitely have realized, the reality of suchness. So again, it's not pointing out that there's never any realization of this, but rather that certain hearers and certain solitary realizers and even certain bodhisattvas are blind to that reality initially, but they will come around to realize the truth of emptiness. So now we get into these explanations of these three reasons that you're not realizing suchness. First, because of the view of the transitory collection. I mentioned this in the meditation tonight. Secondly, that you're not realizing it because of taking pleasure in erroneous ways. That again is the hearers and solitary realizers. Then third, not realizing suchness because of the mind being distracted from emptiness. Not distracted in the way we talk about distraction in developing concentration, but just from the fact that you haven't yet turned your attention to that emptiness. You're kind of caught up in other activities and other views, what have you. So let's look at the first of these categories, a very short commentary for this. Not realizing suchness because of the view of the transitory collection. And this begins in Asanga's text by saying, those fallen into the view of the transitory collection. The sentence beginning constantly explains that they do not understand no self. With no understanding and clinging to self and mine as real, such a view on the transitory collection is unable to believe in the ultimate truth. that is natural cessation of the non-afflicted sphere. I'll qualify that in a moment. It says here then finally, constant meditative equipoise on the Tathagata essence is a characteristic only of the omniscient mind. So what are we talking about with this? We're talking about mainly, again, the ordinary beings, most of whom are caught up in what's called the view of the transitory collections. Let me talk about that first. If you've studied, again, the minds and mental factors part of the mind and cognition course that we have in the basic program, this is one of the mental factors. It's one of what are called the 5 erroneous views or afflicted views. These 5 afflicted views include, the very first one is the view of the transitory collection, which is actually a subset of what we generally refer to as the ignorance grasping at inherent existence. It's just a specific view which entails, for Prasangika Madhyamaka, viewing the I that is merely imputed on this collection of stuff, this transitory collection, and thinking that that I that is merely imputed exists inherently. And of course, it also can take the shape of thinking of the I as a possessor, which is when we think of mine. Mine isn't the object that's possessed, it's the sense of an I that is possessing other things. My body, my mind, my table, my chair, my whatever. All the things that we own, right? We have an aspect of the I that is the possessor of various phenomena. So whenever this view is present, of course, then we are blocked of seeing the lack of inherent existence of the self. So most sentient beings, as I mentioned in the meditation tonight even, are under the control of this erroneous view, this afflicted view. And of course, Master Chandrakirti in his supplement to the Middle Way that some of you are studying, the Tsongkhapa's commentary on that with Venerable George, he says this is the root of samsara, actually. If we were to define what is it that is the principal ignorance that is keeping us going from life to life, it's our grasping at this I and this mind to inherently exist. Of course, because on the basis of that, we create this relationship with all the things around us, trying to satisfy through objects of pleasure that false I, trying to protect from the objects of pain and discomfort, that aspect of I. That I doesn't exist. So again, we are caught up in this. This is the main ignorance, again, that sentient beings are dealing with. So again, they don't understand no self, right? They have no understanding. They cling to the self and mind as real, here meaning having inherent existence. And it's unable, therefore, to believe in the ultimate truth that is the natural cessation. And I would say here, as more accurate, one of the commentaries that I read said, which is the non-afflicted sphere. Because you don't have a natural cessation of the non-afflicted sphere, right? The non-afflicted sphere is the sphere of reality, of emptiness. And so it never ceases. It's the natural cessation, which is the non-afflicted sphere. So ultimate truth, natural cessation, the natural cessation of any stains of inherent existence, they don't exist naturally, as we've been seeing throughout this text, of the non-afflicted sphere. Or I'm sorry, which is the non-afflicted sphere? The non-afflicted sphere of reality, the Dharma Dhatu. Constant meditative equipoise, again, on that is only a characteristic of the omniscient mind. I'm not really sure why that sentence is being added by Gyaltsab Je, but he's just emphasizing that most beings will not experience, again, that full flourishing of the awareness of emptiness that happens in Buddhahood until you have that state, until you have the omniscient mind. But again, I'm not sure the relevance with regard to this particular section. Now we're into the second of these 3 reasons, not realizing suchness because of taking pleasure in erroneous ways. What is the meaning of erroneous ways? Taking pleasure in erroneous ways refers to those of hearer and solitary realizer lineage who, for the time being, have no inclination for emptiness and do not understand it. The following commentary, again from a Sangha, beginning why it is like this, does not mean that having understood the suchness of the Tathagata essence devoid of elaboration, they turn away from meditating on it as permanent bliss, self, and purity, and meditate on it instead as impermanent suffering, as no self, and as impure. kind of a strange sentence because it does seem like what they're saying here. It says it does not mean that having I guess the idea is if they did understand the reality of suchness or emptiness, and then instead turn to the coarser and more mundane ways of looking at the aggregates and so forth. But rather the idea is that they are already doing that. It's just that they have not yet come to the conclusion of emptiness. They perhaps even haven't even received teachings on emptiness. They aren't following tenets that teach to that degree what Prasangika Madhyamaka teaches. So it's not, again, that they're saying it's not that they're meditating on these impermanent, pure or impure suffering, no self. They are meditating on that. Let me share this right now. This was, again, a little handout that I gave you quite a few classes ago as well, dealing with verse 135. Remember, we have these four misconceptions that are related to the four results. We just had them mention the perfection of purity, whereas for most on the Hinayana paths, if they haven't received these teachings, and even those on the Mahayana path, but they're primarily analyzing things in terms of trying to overcome a more conventional misconception, seeing that which is impure as pure. Whereas, again, when we looked at these four results in the third presentation of the 10 presentations, we saw that there is a perfection of purity in the state of full enlightenment, that result. The second one, there's a perfection of highest self. This is the counteracting, having overcome the misconceptions with regard to seeing that which is selfless as actually having a self. And again, the more refined one is seeing that that which lacks a self as inherently existent. Because again, you can have a coarser view of a self. We talked about it earlier tonight, that view of lacking a self-sufficient, substantially existent person. The third one had to do with the perfection of highest bliss, whereas most of those beings in the Hinayana path are working on overcoming, grasping that which is suffering as happiness, while they might still be grasping to that suffering as inherently existent, right? Because they haven't overcome that misconception. Then the final one, the perfection of permanence, which means, again, the continuity to the state of buddhahood going on to benefit others. They grasp what is impermanent as permanent. So this is, again, they're seeing kind of the opposite one, but in relation to conventional truths. Those things can be known in a conventional manner, but as is said in the fourth column, we need to see all of those as lacking inherent existence. And those who are blind to this conception continue to get wrapped up in, caught up in the meditation on these four attributes of true sufferings. Again, they will see some form of selflessness, but they're not going to see the final view of selflessness that is taught by Prasangika Madhyamaka. So again, let's see what goes on in this, because there's more discussion on these four aspects. It says here, the Tathagata essence, very bottom of the page, refers to the ultimate state of phenomena, such as the aggregates. But they take pleasure in meditating on the ultimate state of phenomena, such as the afflicted aggregates, as impermanence, suffering, coarse no self, and impure. Again, they fall into that grouping of beings who are analyzing the aggregates in that way, who have not yet gotten to the level of seeing them in terms of ultimate truth, the ultimate truth taught by Prasangika Madhyamaka. Yeah. So they're meditating on things as if they were inherently existing impermanent, inherently existing suffering, and so on. They do not recognize and do not meditate on it as permanent, as bliss, as self, and as purity. Again, these are the four qualities that were delineated earlier on in regard to the fully realized state of Buddhahood. Okay. All right, let's continue on. It says here, because they have no inclination for these meditations, they do not strive for the four perfections that, again, were in that resultant state of Buddhahood in our third presentation of the 10 presentations, nor do they take any pleasure in meditating on the methods to attain them. The four perfections are the perfection of permanence, which refers to teaching and never falling back from the ultimate realization of the equality of samsara and nirvana. the perfection of bliss, which refers to the total abandonment of the mental body, remember that, and its cause, non-afflicted karma. It's a product of uncontaminated karma that is still a residual thing that the bodhisattvas need to abandon on the pure grounds in order to attain that perfection of bliss. The perfection of highest self, which refers to the pacification of all elaboration, to holding to self and of holding no self as truly existent. That again, phenomena as well as the emptiness of those phenomena, both are completely empty of inherent existence. Finally, the fourth, the perfection of purity, which refers to the total abandonment of the grounds of imprints of ignorance, right? That pure state that a Buddha has that no other beings have, because even arhats and high-level bodhisattvas on the pure grounds lack the complete purity. So again, you might go back and review those. I'm not going to spend any more time on them, but that was, again, the third presentation in the 10 presentations. So those who do not accept a well-examined explanation of this passage, Gyaltsab says, but are attached to its literal meaning, should think about just who these hearers and solitary realizers are that meditate on the Tathagata essence as impermanent, suffering, and impure. Again, I'm not sure about the full meaning of this, and even when I read some of the commentaries, it wasn't really described that clearly. But I'm not sure what this literal rendering is. But the point of this is that these beings in this category, hearers and solitary realizers, who are following these erroneous kind of views, erroneous not in terms of they were taught by the Buddha, but they're not the final meaning. They're not the fully qualified meaning of selflessness or emptiness. They meditate on the aggregates as impermanent and so on, in those four categories that we had on the screen, and they thus realize only the coarse view of selflessness of persons, right? It's not saying, otherwise, I mean, who would these beings be in this category if they weren't those? Because those are the beings who are blocked or incapable of realizing the emptiness that is being discussed here, the suchness according to Prasangika Madhyamaka. So I'm going to skip over here. This little part, again, doesn't have much to it. The skipping, I'm going to go over what's the rest of this page, even part of the next page, to that next category, the third of these three. Remember, we have those under the view of the transitory collection, ordinary beings in general. Then we had the two we just looked at that are following these erroneous ways. And then number three is not realizing suchness because of the mind being distracted from emptiness. And this is primarily talking about the bodhisattvas who are newly on the path, who have not yet realized suchness in a conceptual manner. So it says here, this begins the mind distracted from emptiness, and explains that this refers to a weakening of the understanding of the natural emptiness, the Tathagata essence. The explanation says there are those of the Mahayana bodhisattvas who have developed bodhicitta, right? That's how you get on the Mahayana path, and that uncontrived bodhicitta, but do not understand emptiness, and who say, like some of the here Sautrantika philosophy, and Sautrantika is one of the two Hinayana schools, Vaibhashika and Sautrantika, that by meditating on the antidotes to the truly existing reality of affliction, such as desire, their continuum is severed forever and destroyed, and that this is nirvana. This is kind of referring to, as I take it, one of these teachings that is still, I think, held by some people, that somehow when you get to the end of the continuum and you exit from samsara through, well, you've already attained the realization that gets you there, but you kind of are discarding the aggregates, that causes a severing of the continuity of mind, that somehow mind would cease to exist upon that realization. And this, of course, is not something that the Buddha taught in the final words. I don't know if he taught it, he must have taught it somewhere along for people to get that impression. But it's a really nihilistic kind of view, right? That His Holiness Dalai Lama, I heard he even said once, he said that if this is what it comes down to, is that you actually achieve that state and then you cease to exist. He said, I think I'd rather stay in samsara. You know? Why would you want to embrace non-existence? Okay. So I don't know. This is the way that I understand this in terms of how it's being presented there in that first part. It says, therefore, phenomena are destroyed, meaning that phenomena previously truly existing are then destroyed. This is something we're also going to see later that is not true, right? We never had a truly existent self, and that somehow that's destroyed. We just believe in something that doesn't exist. There's no kind of getting rid of or destroying the truly existent self. And that's where I guess they get this idea that you would then have no continuity of mind, because once you've achieved that state of realizing lack of inherent existence completely of the self, there's no self then that exists because you've destroyed it. They assert this understanding of emptiness, which is a coarse emptiness of self, to be the emptiness that is the gateway to liberation. This is referring to a type of bodhisattva who has not understood anything beyond the views of the hero Sautrantika philosophy, as taught in the Abhidharma Kosha, root text, and the commentary, as well as the 7 treatises on valid cognition. So again, those lower schools, they do have systems that point out their tenets of adhering to that view of selflessness. But those, again, are not the final word of the Buddha. Useful realizations, but they don't get you there in the end. They don't get you to the final result of enlightenment or liberation. Secondly, there are also those bodhisattvas, great bodhisattvas of Yogacara Chittamatra views. I guess they're calling them great because they actually are subscribing to Mahayana tenets. But they're within the Yogacara Chittamatra, the kind of the yogi mind-only school, which is really it's the same school. It's just giving 2 names to that, who say that the reality to be realized by the analytical mind of ultimate depth and the emptiness to be meditated on is a phenomenon separated from form and so forth. Here, form summarizes external phenomena, and separated from means refuted. So you've refuted again that form exists externally, that you kind of have this external form that we are experiencing. In their tenets, they believe that that is an appearance that is rising through karma on our minds that gives forth a false appearance of both the subjective awareness and the objective form that are being distinct and separate, and that form existing external to the mind. So again, they say that this means refuted, and phenomenon is a truly existent entity that is the emptiness of there being any difference in substance between apprehended object, as I was just pointing out, and apprehending consciousness. This paragraph refutes those who maintain that the philosophy of the Mahayana Uttara Tantra does not go beyond that of the Vijnavadin. Vijnavadin is a third name for the mind-only school, the Yogacara, Chittamatra, Vijnavadin. These are all ways that we could be referring to them. So again, what is saying here is we could include in this category, those beings who are have exposure to Mahayana tenets, but have not yet realized the subtle emptiness that is taught there. They're adhering to another view of emptiness that, again, is in the third wheel turning in which the Tathagata essence was taught, but it's specifically set out in sutras like the Sutra Unraveling the Thought. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but that's just pointing out that you can have other bodhisattvas in this category. Those bodhisattvas who are following tenets of the lower systems, the Hinayana tenets, but also the great bodhisattvas following the Chittamatra views. And I would say that you can furthermore even include in there those who are on the Svatantrika Madhyamaka, right? Because they have not yet found the Prasangika point of view. The last paragraph on the screen there, those who assert that the former position is a view of non-existence, meaning the first paragraph, those being bodhisattvas who are adhering to the kind of Sautrantika and lower systems, and the latter, a view of existence, should be known that both positions fall to the extremes of both existence and non-existence. So let's talk about this. How is the first one primarily a view of non-existence? Because it's saying that when you get to the kind of negating this view of a truly existent self, that you negate the self, it's destroyed. There's no longer a continuity of anything. That's a non-existence. It's a deprecation, because consciousness does go on. Even for those realizing the Hinayana, arhatship, their consciousness goes on. And once, of course, you attain Buddhahood, your consciousness goes on. You're never destroying it, and you're never, again, kind of creating that non-existence through your realizations. You're simply negating what you have fictitiously believed in again. There's no truly existent self that's being negated through your realization of emptiness, because a truly existent self never existed. Now, how is the second one adhering to existence? Because it is putting forward, let me go to my notes here to make sure I'm giving you the right explanation. It's putting forward the true existence of emptiness. It's still adhering to the true existence of phenomena, the inherent existence of phenomena, right? Because it's not negating enough. Of course, the way that Chittamatra is negating is not a full view of emptiness. So they haven't touched on the lack of true existence of the self. So they are still adhering to some level of inherent existence. I think that was even said in the paragraph. It says, is a truly existent entity, right? They're saying that that emptiness, that is the lack of difference between the object known, the apprehended, and the apprehending awareness, the subject, that emptiness is truly existing. So they are adhering to a superimposition which falls into the extreme of existence. I know using these words existence and non-existence over and over again gets a little confusing, but essentially non-existence would mean they're deprecating something that does exist. Existence means they're superimposing upon things that exist in an erroneous way. So again, emptiness does exist according to Prasangika Madhyamaka as well, but it doesn't exist inherently. Their emptiness, the Chittamatran, does. Okay, so what Gyaltsabje was pointing out is you could say, yes, there is this view of non-existence in the first one that was being talked about, a view of existence in the second one, but they both actually fall into both extremes. So how does the first bodhisattva, who is adhering to the Sautrantika tenets, fall into the extreme of existence? Because they believe in the true existence of the afflictions and so on, right? That was even mentioned. They say that by meditating on the antidotes to the truly existing reality of afflictions, that they sever the continuity of those. So essentially, they are saying that the aggregates do exist truly, inherently. Because again, they haven't touched that object of negation at all. Then, on the other hand, those of the Chittamatran who are following the Chittamatran tenets, the mind only, have a view of non existence because they are putting forward the non existence of external form. Their view of emptiness, again, is that anything that appears externally, all the stuff that appears external to you right now, doesn't exist in that way. That's a deprecation because things do exist externally according to Prasangika Madhyamaka. Not inherently, but nonetheless external. You know, the computer or the chair or whatever it is in your field of awareness, those things are external to the mind. They are not, according to the Chittamatran point of view, the same substance as the awareness to which they are appearing and being known. So we can say both of these bodhisattvas are falling into both extremes. They're superimposing at times, primarily through holding to some level of true existence. That's how all the lower schools are superimposing, according to Prasangika Madhyamaka, because they don't want to refute that. They think that that's going too far. That refutes that things exist at all. But they also have their own way that they are falling into non-existence, because they're teaching something contrary to the way Buddha says in the final tenets as to how things actually do exist. You know, again, the person still does exist. The aggregates, the mind still does exist. They just don't exist inherently. They're not utterly destroyed. You know, an external form does exist as external. It doesn't exist in the way that Chittamatran puts forward. Anyway, that's just a little point. I'm not going to want to belabor it because I'm needing to move on to the next topic. Before I do this, let me share a little bit. Actually, I forgot to open this. Sorry. Let me get that up on the screen here. I do have some slides with the explanation from Geshe Loden, and I've been trying to share that as I go through, but I went too far in here. Oops. Okay. Let me put it on slideshow, and then I will pull this up from Zoom. Okay. So these are the slides for tonight. Again, I am repeating some slides from last week, the first three. That's what we're going to go through right now. This is how, I'm sorry, it's Geshe Jumpo Gyaltsen. I forgot. Yeah, Geshe Loden doesn't say a whole lot more about the rest of what we're studying, except when we get to the 5 types of error or whatever, the 5 faults of beings, we'll get to him, come back to him there. This is from Geshe Jumpo Gyaltsen. He says, these 3 reasons not to perceive emptiness include the 4 beings. 1, the first reason was the view of the transitory collection, which relates to the first kind of being, the ordinary being who has not entered the path, right? Okay. Secondly, the second reason not to perceive emptiness was taking pleasure in erroneous ways, which includes the hearers, shavakas, and solitary realizers, pratyeka Buddhas, who hold other views. Kind of a real encapsulated way of talking about this. You don't have to get into all the detail when you just say it this way, but you need to have the understanding of what is entailed in all of this. The third reason, not perceiving suchness due to distraction, and I inserted in brackets from the view of emptiness, is not just simply distraction. That refers to the 4th category, the 4th kind of being, those who have newly entered the Mahayana path of accumulation. These new bodhisattvas have erroneous views because they do not assert emptiness, but assert truly existing afflictions such as attachment and so on. Why? Because they have not yet discerned emptiness of inherent existence. Again, not all of them, because some bodhisattvas on the path of accumulation will have realized emptiness conceptually. But this is the main ones that we're looking at, all right? Okay, so I don't know that I need to share any more slides. Let's go back to our text. We're entering another chapter, getting into some really brief chapters now compared to like the chapter on the 9 similes that went on for several months. Chapter 8 is identifying the nature of the basic element. So we talked about the consciousnesses that know it. Now we're going to actually look at the nature itself. Of course, we've talked about it extensively, so this shouldn't be much of a surprise, but it's a nice little structure for looking at the emptiness of the mind. Question is raised, what is this Tathagata essence, which is spoken of as emptiness and which is not the object of a distracted mind? So that's kind of the connection from what we just saw. The bodhisattvas who are distracted to that view of emptiness, what is this emptiness? Get to the root text. We're going to be talking about a couple of sections here. The true state, the phenomena of the basis, the view that understands this true state, and the result of meditating on this view. And in a little bit, we're going to see that these 3 then, by being set out in this way, are correlated to a sort of a triad that is often used in talking about Buddhism. His Holiness actually uses this frequently. You first have the base or the basis. What is the basis of the path, essentially, of your entire method of achieving realizations? It's the 2 truths. Because we essentially have the all phenomena that exist conventionally and the emptiness of all those phenomena. The basis of all of our realizations and of our progress on the path is the 2 truths. The path, which is the second element after the basis, is the realization of the emptiness of phenomena, the ultimate truth, by which one knows conventional truth then. Because it's only once we know ultimate truth that we actually know the fine way, the very subtle way that conventional truths exist as mere designations, only nominal existence, because they lack anything more than that through realizing their emptiness of inherent existence. Then the third element is the result. The result is what you achieve once you have culminated the path. That's the results of Buddhahood. And of course, we can talk about all of these in terms of, the 2 truths and the 2 aspects of the path, because our method aspect of the path is more correlated to conventional truth. Our wisdom aspect is correlated to ultimate truth. When you get to Buddhahood, you have the Dharmakaya, which is more correlated to the wisdom aspect and therefore the ultimate truth. And then you have the form bodies, the Rupakaya and so on, that are more correlated to conventional truths and what have you. But essentially, this is a frequent way that we can talk about the entire method of achieving enlightenment. You have a basis, you have a path, and you have the fruit, the result. Okay? So that's what we're going to be looking at in terms of this one verse. It's going to have the first 2 lines pertaining to the basis. So let's look at those now. There is nothing to be removed, there is not the slightest to be added. This would be like a nice fortune cookie at a Buddhist cafe, right, or a Buddhist restaurant. And everyone kind of puzzled as they're eating their food. In this naturally pure basic element, there is nothing to be removed. In other words, there never was inherent existence that you're removing. It is the lack of inherent existence that has always been there, what we've been calling throughout this entire course the natural purity. Gyaltsab continues. He says, this means that the apprehended objects of the consciousness holding to the true existence of self and phenomena, as well as afflictions existing by their own nature, do not exist as phenomena to be newly removed within this basic element. It's not like we are taking that truly existent stuff and removing it and exposing the emptiness of the mind. The mind has always been empty, and none of that exists in and of itself. It is a fiction that our ignorance has created, right? There's nothing removed. This is because the apprehended objects of the two types of holding to true existence, as well as afflictions existing by their own nature, have never been experienced as existing from the very beginning. No Buddha, no being, nothing, no one anywhere has ever seen true existence to exist through their analysis. Yes, it appears to us through the force of our imprints of ignorance. That's again what we remove finally in the last stages of the Bodhisattva path. But it does not exist. It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. Like we've been believing in something since beginningless time that has no existence whatsoever. And it never was there. You're not removing that. You are removing the ignorance. Way back, again, I think I was meaning to go back to that initial slide. Way back at the beginning of this course, I was introducing some of these main concepts. And remember, I talked about how there are objects to be negated, objects of negations that exist and that don't exist. The objects of negation that exist are the ignorance that are adhering to the objects of negation that don't exist. The objects of negation that don't exist are these truly existent I, truly existent whatever, any phenomenon that is being held by that ignorance to exist. The ignorance exists without a doubt. It doesn't exist inherently, it exists conventionally. We wouldn't be in samsara and we wouldn't be unenlightened if that ignorance didn't exist. But the object of that ignorance does not exist at all. As they often say, not one iota of true existence or inherent existence. So we can talk about the objects of negation then that are removed through the path, which is our ignorance and so on, which is eventually removed and all the imprints of that, and we attain Buddhahood. But the object of negation that doesn't exist is simply removed through the wisdom that sees its lack of inherent existence. You are negating what you have mistakenly been holding to. You're not negating something that exists. And I think it's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it that way, but let's carry on with this. So it says, although holding to the true, this is the last sentence in that first paragraph, although holding to the true existence of afflictions is included in holding to the true existence of phenomena, there is a need to mention it separately. So again, we can say phenomena includes everything. Well, and when we talk about self of persons and self of phenomena, there we delineate it as referring to all phenomena other than persons, because persons have their own category. But afflictions would be included in phenomena then, right? But it's set out separately here once more because there is that idea of adhering to the afflictions as inherently existent, which we were talked about previously, right? With those hearers and solitary realizers that are adhering to that because of their false tenets that they, well, not false tenets, lower tenets that they are adhering to. All right, the last part of this on this page. Within this basic element, there is nothing to be added in the sense of the two types of no self not being there previously and newly added later. So not only is there nothing to be removed, there's nothing to be added. Through your realization of the emptiness of the I, you're not adding some emptiness to what already existed as the I. The emptiness is already there. The lack of a self of persons has always existed on this basis. of the I. The I is merely designated to this collection of things, this collection of mind and body. It has never had any inherent existence. You're not kind of newly realizing an emptiness that then gets put on this I. The emptiness has already been there. It's been there since beginningless time, and we've been blind to that reality. So in this way, it is pointing to these two things. Not only is there some sort of true existence that we are removing from phenomena, nor are we then adding in the emptiness of that, which makes sense because those two go hand in hand, right? If you have something that's truly existent, then you would be removing that and putting in its place the lack of that. But it's never had that. The natural state of things is lacking inherent existence. They've never had an atom of inherent existence, and you're not newly establishing emptiness for them by way of creating it. It's always been there. You're newly realizing it, sure, but you're not the creator of that emptiness. It's not something that you're negating the true existence that was there and getting rid of it, and therefore you're creating that emptiness or that lack of true existence. It's always been there. Okay, then we continue the second sentence. This is because the absence of the two types of self, again, persons and phenomena other than persons, is the nature of the basic element. That is its emptiness, the emptiness of our minds. This line teaches, that second line, that to assert that the two types of no self do not exist is a deprecation, right? Because if we say they're not there now, we're going to make them existent. That deprecates the true state of being. It misunderstands the true state of being, that the basic element is there in its empty state, always has been. And that the negation of the object of that apprehension is not something then to be newly added. Yeah, that one might fall into more of a superimposition as opposed to a deprecation. But if we say there's supposed to be something that we're kind of newly putting on this phenomenon called the I or the person that wasn't there before, well, then that's superimposing something that the Buddha says, no, that it always was there. You're giving kind of some status to it because of this view that you're holding here. So it says not to understand the statements that there are no defilements to be removed and no antidotes to be developed in the context of the object to be refuted, but to hold them as general statements is to deprecate antidotes and the process of abandonment. So again, it's just reiterating that these two lines are setting forth kind of how things work, that there's never been any true existence that's going to have to be removed. There's never been an emptiness that we are newly establishing with regard to phenomena. They've always been there in that state. That's what we mean by the naturally abiding lineage, by the natural emptiness of our minds. It says, moreover, the second line is a reiteration of what is taught by the first line, as I was explaining a short while ago. Because if it is established that truly existing afflictions are not something that previously exist and then become non-existent, it will also be established that the emptiness of the true existence of afflictions is not something that is previously non-existent and later becomes existent, right? So I hope you're kind of following this. I'm just kind of reciting the words and trying to give a little explanation. But to me, it's just, again, getting at what is the nature of this Tathagata essence. That's this whole section. What is its nature? Its nature is that it is, once more, free from the beginning, pure. It's never had a stain of inherent existence that we're removing. It also has always had the state of emptiness because we're not kind of newly getting emptiness to exist on this base. It's always been there. Again, not a huge point, but it's one that really does get at the nature in the end of the two truths. Let's look at how we arrive at that through the remainder of this commentary. So let's push it up a little bit. The above is explained on the basis of the self-isolate generality actually taught by these lines. To apply them to actual examples, in other words, not just this kind of concept around emptiness, within this basic element, there is no self and no aggregates formerly truly existing and then that later removed. Like the truly existent self wasn't there that you're removing to reveal that self that is still existing there. This establishes the ultimate truth or emptiness of true existence. So that first line is referring to ultimate truth. That the ultimate truth is that everything has been empty from the beginning, has never again had an atom of inherent existence. And we are not removing anything through realizing the emptiness of that, of any phenomenon, the self, the aggregates, the mind. If that is established, Gyaltsab says, then it is established that there is no emptiness of true existence in its false, an illusion-like appearance previously not existing, and later added or established. Right? You're not newly adding that emptiness, it's already there. This establishes the conventional truth, whereby all deeds and activities are valid within this natural emptiness. So again, what you're getting at is everything has been together with these two modes of being, if you will. Anything that we establish as conventional truth has never been separated from its emptiness. We're not newly finding out that everything is conventional truth and establishing its ultimate truth from the get-go. The ultimate truth has always been there. And we use this phrase that these are inextricably bound up, that they are together with each other and have always been since beginningless time. We just haven't realized them that way. Conventional truths have appeared to have inherent existence. We have been blind to their ultimate truth. As was saying, we're going to go to this next section in a moment. When we realize their ultimate truth, we see them for what they are, the way that conventional truths actually exist, which is without any inherent existence, which is as mere designations, mere imputations. And by virtue of these two truths coming to their culmination, we achieve the result of enlightenment through realizing them fully. So let's carry on. There's just a little bit left of this, and then we go on to the next line. To summarize, these two lines then teach the union of the two truths, again, which are the basis, accepted without problem in our tradition, and which comprise the ultimate truth or emptiness of true existence, in which the focus of holding to true existence has no place at all, because it's contrary to how things actually exist. And secondly, the conventional truth of the valid presentation of deeds and activities. And this is what there is. This is what it boils down to. All of reality is either conventional truth. Anything is either conventional truth or ultimate truth. But every conventional truth is together with its ultimate truth and always has been. We just simply have not realized it as such. That's its suchness. The second one has very small commentary here. The view that realizes this true state, remember, this is applicable to the path. The perfect truth is that self and aggregates are empty by nature. And likewise, the perfect view of this, the wisdom realizing no nature, is the view that realizes the true state of being. So, okay, in the first two lines, Maitreya was setting out what is the nature of things actually, that you have ultimate truth and conventional truth. Neither of them ever really tainted by true existence, and emptiness always being the state of everything that exists. Realizing that emptiness is the, realizing the true state of beings, of being, of whatever phenomenon that we're analyzing. That is exactly how it exists. That's the perfect view. That's the path. It's not saying that there's nothing else to the path. Obviously, there are many other elements because we have the conventional dimension of the path that pertains to the method aspect that entails practicing generosity and all the other perfections that are not the perfection of wisdom. But the perfection of wisdom itself, of course, is essential to getting to that result of enlightenment. And as I said earlier, only by knowing the emptiness of phenomena do you really know their subtle mode of conventional truth, conventional appearance. Third, the result of meditating on this view, this is the fruit or the result of the path. Upon seeing reality, you are liberated. When grasped by the method side of vast practice, the direct realization of the perfect truth meditated upon again and again will produce its result, the liberation that is the state of a perfect Buddha. This is the means, again, if we go back to that chart, you do have the method aspect, which is at the top of the screen there, the three great countless eons of merit that need to be accumulated. through all the other bodhisattva practices, through your bodhicitta, engaging in activities for the benefit of others. That's being done in subsequent attainment when you're off the cushion. When you're on the cushion, you are directly realizing emptiness, starting with the path of seeing, continuing to develop that wisdom, realizing emptiness to remove subtler and subtler obscurations until you enter into the result. What's being called here liberation, but specifically meaning the liberation that is the state of buddhahood, state of a perfect Buddha. Okay? And we're going to see in a little bit that one that correlates those more clearly to the path, the basis, the path, and the result, or the fruit. Let's go on to 156. The basic element in this Tathagata essence is empty of adventitious defilements, which are separable in character. You know, that they can be separated because they don't exist within the nature of that. You know, the nature of the mind is emptiness. So the adventitious defilements don't actually penetrate the nature of the mind, though they have this separable characteristic. They can be removed from the mind. So what we're primarily talking about this is that those objects of negation that do exist. We just talked about the ones that don't exist. True existence. True existence doesn't exist. It's a fiction that we've created through the force of our ignorance. What does exist are the adventitious defilements, which don't exist in the kind of nature of the mind, because the mind is free of inherent existence, but they do exist, that ignorance exists as an element that can be separated out. You can remove it, just like going back to the analogy of the dirt in the glass of water, you can remove the dirt. So, commentary, within this element, I didn't read the rest of the verse. It is not empty of the unsurpassable qualities, which are of inseparable character. Again, that with its natural essence of emptiness, all the qualities of that are there together with that. It's not, again, that it's empty of that. It's empty of any of the adventitious defilements. Okay, within this element, there are no truly existing afflictions that exist formerly and are later destroyed. We just looked at that concept, right? Because from the very beginning, the element is empty of truly existent of adventitious defilements, right? There is no truly existent adventitious defilements. There's only the adventitious defilements that exist conventionally that can be removed, that are separable. And the characteristics of adventitious defilements are that they are separable and can be removed by meditation upon the antidotes. So this teaches the nature of both truths, right? Because we say the emptiness exists as an entity with never been stained by inherent or true existence, and the afflictions that are polluting the mind exist only conventionally. They don't have any true existence. They can be removed because they are subject to the rules of dependent arising. If you remove the causes for those, they will be annihilated. That ignorance can be removed, again, by meditation upon the antidotes. So this teaches the nature of both truths, that by meditating on the antidotes, the afflictions can be removed, and that truly existing afflictions have never existed from the beginning. And something that we've encountered previously in this text. This is just kind of wrapping it all up to some degree by saying, what is this nature? The nature is, again, together with the conventional aspects, but neither of them have ever been tainted by true existence. And both, in the end, are mere designations. Doesn't go into that specific teaching as part of this, but that's the consequence of it. So next paragraph, the empty nature of the afflictions is not something that is previously non-existent and has to be added later, as we saw as well previously. This is because the focus for the potential to develop the qualities of dharmas of the unsurpassed Buddhas, the powers and so forth, endowed with the characteristics of inseparability, is on the natural emptiness of the afflictions. And the element is not empty of this. Let me stop there. Okay, this first part is saying that was kind of pertaining to those last two lines of the verse 156. We go back just a page. We see that it is not empty of the unsurpassable qualities, which are of inseparable character. This is saying that, again, the You find it. This is because the focus for the potential to develop those qualities of dharmas, of the unsurpassed Buddha, the 10 powers and so forth, all of the basis for all those to develop is the mind that is empty of inherent existence, endowed with the characteristics of inseparability. It's together with the mind. Because in conventional language, we can say that there are these qualities together with the mind, all lacking inherent existence, all merely imputed, but nonetheless, those characteristics of a Buddha. And that is based on the natural emptiness of the afflictions and, of course, of the mind. And the element is not empty of this because this emptiness has existed since the very beginning. Again, you're not empty of the emptiness of the lack of inherent existence or whatever. That emptiness has always been there. You're not newly adding anything. It's just reiterating these 2 points from a slightly different angle. There's nothing that is truly existent that needs to be removed. There is no emptiness that we need to add, that we need to put onto phenomena, because that emptiness has always been there. And that emptiness acts as the support for everything that happens in terms of the culmination of the path resulting in the state of Buddhahood. This teaches that the ultimate truth, which is the focus of the wisdom directly realizing no self, which itself is the cause of these dharmas of the Buddha, has existed since the very beginning. In a sense, this is kind of the whole point of this text, to teach that the emptiness of the mind, which when we realize that emptiness, becomes the cause of the dharmas of the Buddhas, the qualities of the Buddhas. And that's been there since beginningless time. We have had Buddha potential, Buddha nature, since beginningless time. We just have not realized it, you know? But it's always been there. The emptiness of the mind has always been there. That mind we don't need to newly establish the emptiness. We don't need to remove any true existence. All the stains are adventitious. Kind of heartening, I think, when we think about it that way. So this is the part that, in my estimation, goes back to verse 155. Remember, we had the first 2 lines. These lines explain the basis as the conventional truth and the ultimate truth in those first 2 lines. Second, the third line, the path as the wisdom directly realizing no self. And then the fourth line and the third element, the fruit or the result, as the potential to attain the state of a Buddha. Makes sense, right? We have this basis. And His Holiness, I think some of you, again, were at the Exploring Buddhism teachings that I did, where we talked about this in terms of the truths, exploring the truths. His Holiness often, again, teaches from that vantage point of starting off with the 2 truths, even with beginning students, which is kind of mind-blowing because you start talking about emptiness right from the get-go. And he says, essentially, he does talk about compassion before that, but he says, well, if you have this compassion that wants to become a Buddha for the sake of others, how do you do that? By first discerning the basis, the 2 truths, that there are 2 categories of phenomena: conventional truths, which are together, each of them with their ultimate truth. This conventional truth has never been stained by inherent existence either, but we mistakenly believe it to have that. Coming to realize its ultimate truth, that it lacks inherent existence, we then again discern the second element of truth, but we come back to understand conventional truths in a very different light because we have negated the fiction that we've created in relation to them. And we see them as simply, again, nominally existent, having no inherent existence whatsoever. So that's, in my estimation, what's going on in that part here, where we see the first 2 lines of this paragraph referring back to verse 155. To assert that they teach a conventional truth, emptiness of self, in which, for example, a vas is empty of being a vas, and an ultimate truth, emptiness of other, in which the ultimate truth truly exists, is outside the tenets of this text and is the ultimate superimposition and deprecation. So you do have some people interpreting self-emptiness, Rangjung, as being the emptiness of things being what they are. We know that is not what we mean by emptiness. And then there's this, and that's Rongtong, I think Rongtong, and then Shentong. Shentong is the other emptiness, that things are empty of something that is not them. And again, I don't have perfect understanding of all this. Jeffrey Hopkins has written extensively on this Shenpong kind of view of emptiness. And this, of course, is not what we mean by emptiness either. We mean that a phenomenon, such as the eye, lacks its own inherent existence. It doesn't lack its mere existence, because then it would be utterly non-existent. It can't lack something else, because then we would never refute the fault with relation to that. It lacks the inherent existence that we are imputing falsely on it, that we are mistakenly conceiving in relation to it. Okay. Yes, Stephen. Time for some water. Okay.
Yeah, thanks for taking my question, Don. Has to do with the term inseparable.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a little bit unsure of what that means. You might have explained it.
Yeah.
I just missed it. Talking about like the qualities.
I think what they're meaning is that we don't, they're part and parcel of that emptiness. Because again, when we talk about this whole concept of things being inextricably bound up with their emptiness. So anything we say is conventional, such as the mind of a Buddha, the fully developed mind of a Buddha, and the qualities that exist within that, the 10 powers and so on, is inseparable in the end from its emptiness. So when we can conceptually designate these things, right? But in essence, everything is in that non-dual manner, in a sense. I mean, we make it dual through virtue of our kind of picking it apart through our conceptual mind. But to the mind of a Buddha, essentially it's one mind. We can talk about the Buddha's mind that is realizing the emptiness of all phenomena, that mode. And then we have the Buddha that's realizing the vast, the conventional truths that exist. But in the sense, they're all inseparable. I think that's what it's getting at, is kind of the inseparable nature of these things when you finally, it's not like you have something that is totally divorced from that. It's its emptiness, again, that allows for the mind to change and develop into Buddhahood. Without the emptiness of the mind, that could never take place. And so the developmental lineage that we have prior to that, the naturally abiding lineage that exists in beings whose minds are together with stain, those two converge in a sense and become the inseparable qualities of a Buddha at the point of having removed everything that has limited our experience of reality. So that's how I take it, is meaning that they're kind of part and parcel of the same phenomenon. They can be conceptually separated, sure, because we can designate particular things, but they are there together. And we're not saying that they're one in all ways, but we do have an idea that there's a oneness to them that can't be really isolated. And again, because the emptiness of a Buddha's mind and the Buddha's mind are totally coexistent and totally caught up in that, and not separable in the end, either of them. I guess by separable, we'd mean kind of separable in a sort of more definitive way, as opposed to just conceptually separable. That's how I'm taking it. But again, I don't claim to have perfect knowledge.
Thank you, Don.
Uh-huh. Venerable Dundrup wants to ask a question or make us, yeah, please.
So if a person comes across, culturally one of these lower, you're kind of stuck with the system, the tenet system of your society, your culture,
The teachers who are teaching you and so on, yeah.
And so if they're, endeavoring and they're trying to realize Aryas obviously exist. There are people who are not Mahayana practitioners who exist in these other countries, Southeast Asian countries, and they do validly, are achieving individual liberation.
Correct.
Those tenet systems are not, widely, as I understand it, like generally espousing the Tibetan Prasangika Madhyamaka system. So what is the mechanism that a person who's in that situation, how are they getting to more refined view? Are they stuck?
Mm.
Like, does it have to be like a future life where like they've been attracted and then,
Yeah.
I mean, or is it something that just magically like happens in meditation? Like, how do they know that they're
Mm.
not going far enough
Mhm.
and then they do go far enough?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. I don't know that there's a single answer to that, because obviously every being's kind of own karmic situation is going to be very different. The karma that someone has to be attracted to the teachings of the lower tenet systems that would purport to be the final way out to achieve arhatship are not really that. So even though they practice those, they would never really attain aryaship, much less arhatship. They can never really have that direct realization of emptiness, because again, according to Prasangika Madhyamaka, the only way to remove the afflictive obscurations, and then of course to go on to remove the knowledge obscurations, is through the view realizing emptiness of inherent existence. So what happens to those beings, to your question of like, how do they find this emptiness? It's interesting in the book on the Golok Kagyu traditions of Mahamudra that His Holiness wrote, that Alex Berzin translated, he talks in there about the Chittamatrans, and he seemed to be alluding to, at least in the way His Holiness was talking about it, that they do find the Madhyamika view eventually, because they kind of do hit a ceiling. They've got that Mahayana lineage and orientation, and they kind of keep working at it in their minds, and this realization of the mind-only emptiness can be a stepping stone to get you to Prasangika Madhyamaka. Whereas the coarser views, they are somewhat of a stepping stone, but they obviously don't get you to question things more deeply. That's why there's so much resistance, why all the schools below Prasangika Madhyamaka adhere to true existence and inherent existence and won't let that go. So where do they find those teachings? Again, through their karma, hopefully they create the causes to meet with Mahayana gurus who provide them with the tenets of the Mahayana. Again, I don't want to make it sound exclusive, because it's not only Hinayanas who practice Hinayana tenets and Mahayanas who practice Mahayana tenets, because you can have Hinayanas who practice Mahayana tenets, and vice versa, even Mahayanas who practice Hinayana tenets. So by virtue of that, you want to I guess these beings would have to at some point create the karma to encounter those who teach the Mahayana tenets, those who actually teach the pathway out, the realization of emptiness of inherent existence. And that could happen in any number of ways. But you would think that their dedication to a path would ripen eventually into that karma being there for them to encounter those beings. I don't know how many of them are capable of achieving it on their own through their own insight after they sit on the cushion and they realize the lack of a self-sufficient, substantially existent person. Do they naturally go to negating more because they see this hasn't done the trick? Because it won't. It won't do the trick. It can make you somewhat subdued. Tsongkhapa does say that that misconception does exist innately within us, of a self-sufficient, substantially existent self. It's just not the root problem. The root problem is the inherently existent self, which is subtler and obviously is touching on something much greater than what the substantially existent self-sufficient self consists of, that is negated through that realization. So I've never heard any sort of, again, definitive answer of how this happens. I've never even really gotten clear about how beings who get through the Arhat path are able to come back into the Bodhisattva path and actually continue to develop their minds when, it seems like they're, again, how would you generate the perfection of patience when you cannot even generate any anger in your mind, right? I mean, maybe that's a benefit, but how would you accumulate the kind of practice of patience through that? And then, of course, you jump to Tantra, and Tantra involves working with the energy of the afflictions. Well, you have no afflictions left. So how do you practice Tantra as an arhat that has completed the Hinayana path? So there's a lot of these questions about what happens to practitioners who take kind of these little other routes that are taught by the Buddha for their advantage, for them to have a path to follow, but become a little more complicated when you come back into the Mahayana, or when you realize that, again, these are not the final view, these are just a stepping stone. So I'm kind of a long-winded answer to I don't know, because I really don't. Um, It may seem like, again, some might be able to do that through their own investigation, very sharp facultied Hindianist practitioners who would, naturally go to investigating the self at a deeper level because once more, they see it doesn't do the trick. They aren't able to actually achieve the state of an Arya, much less Arhat. So let me see where I'm at because I would like to at least, let you know. I think I did finish this section. The next section on page 212 that we were on, all the way to the middle of 213, I am also skipping. So when we return next week, we will go start at the middle of 213, teaching that this true state is not an object for those distracted from emptiness and who take pleasure in erroneous ways. Again, just kind of pointing out that those beings who we just talked about, they don't have this view yet. This is not a view for them yet, but it will be eventually, as we were just discussing. Through some karmic shift, they will receive these teachings through the grace of a Buddha that is then emanating for them and giving them those teachings. And we can say that all the Buddhas are doing everything from their side to give us the perfect Mahayana view of things, the Prasangika Madhyamaka view of things, because that's what they really want for us, is to realize this emptiness and to become a Buddha just like them. But obviously, we don't have karma to all receive those teachings. So we might receive teachings that help us to a certain degree, but don't get us the full distance. And we will eventually get the full distance, I think, because again, it's very meritorious to go on this quest of looking for liberation and enlightenment, right? It's already got incredible power to it. So anyway, again, next week we can carry on from there. We'll go into the next section, the purpose of teaching that sentient beings possess the basic element. Then I think there's just like a little bit left after that. Initially, I had thought that I could finish this a little early, perhaps, and the final class on Lama Tsongkhapa Day, we might be able to do some sort of practice together instead, but I'm just not feeling that confident in that. It's just taken a little longer to get through some of these sections than I thought, but it's okay. I mean, do you know, Venerable, is there something going on Lama Tsongkhapa Day earlier that day? Are you going to have puja? Maybe at like 5 p.m. or something when you often do puja, so it'll be done by the class. So you'll certainly be an opportunity to engage in practice, maybe again a puja at around 5 p.m. Mountain Time that you could come to. All right, let's do our discussion. Let me put on the board the questions that we have. Again, some of these questions I did not get to. I apologize for that. That's just, again, as you know, what happens. So from last week, the question that I didn't get to last week is about these 4 types of being, the 3 reasons that were given and how they correspond to each other. So that's, again, primarily a commenting on verse 154. Then this I did go through. Verse 155, remember how I talked about the first 2 lines, the 3rd line, and then the 4th line. Please comment then after commenting on each of those, what Gyaltsab says that those 3 parts of verse 155 explain in regard to the overall structure of the way in which to attain enlightenment. I think that's clear from what I said earlier and what was in that last bit that we went. And then this I haven't touched on then. So this will be one that appears next week. And please explain the 2 arguments because we haven't gotten to that yet. By the way, for the rest of this course, probably maybe the last one, I might do something a little different. Choose any from among the previous integration practices because I don't know that I can really put any together on some of this. It's a little difficult, but before we go on to the discussion, though, I would like to get a read from people because I need to know if I have to have a exam prepared for this. I'm sensing that there are people who want to do this with an exam. And as long as there's one, I will do it. And we have one hand up here in the Gompa. So I will be doing this over the Thanksgiving break. That'll be my big task, is to kind of go through, finish off, put the rest of the questions together for the remaining part of the text, and then to compile the exam as best as I can. My hope was to give that exam to everyone by the last class, or it'll be in a form. How I do it, I'll explain then, but essentially you'll receive the questions to study. Well, you've got the questions to study in a sense, so I might winnow those down a bit. And then you essentially do the exam in an honor system kind of way, where you find the time that you sit down and actually do the full exam, not having seen the exam prior to that, though again, you'll be given guidance about what questions will be on it. And then you just turn it into me, and then I grade it and so on. But I was thinking to do that before the holidays so that if there was an opportunity for people to do it during the break when some of you aren't working or whatever, then you would have that chance to do it. But I'll give like a month or two to do it. I mean, I'm not going to give you just like a few weeks or something. If you, just get it to me within that time frame, or if you have problems, you can just request a longer time frame. So Shayla, you're alone in the Zoom room now. Would you like to join the discussion here, and they can use the microphone when they're discussing, and you can chime in? Would you like that, or?
Sure, I do need to leave in a few minutes, so maybe it's not worth the trouble. I can just sit here and go through the questions myself. So.
Okay, all right. So then, do you want us to share on microphone what people are saying here, or no?
Sure, sure.
Okay,
it doesn't matter.
All right. Okay, I will leave you all to discuss. I'm gonna be off for just a little bit. Okay, so let's just do our conclusion. We've only had the discussion group here in the Gampa, so let's go ahead and do the conclusion to tonight with the prayers, because we were even dealing with some questions there. So let's go to the dedication prayer, starting with the one on the screen. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish but increase more and more. And let's do the prayers for our teachers, beginning with His Holiness's long life prayer and the prayer for his wishes to be fulfilled. As we recite this, think that we're trying to create the causes for all of our gurus to have these same results: good health, long lives, and all of their holy wishes completely fulfilled. The wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, to the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. And then to try to create the causes, or to create the causes, not try, to create the causes for Rinpoche's swift return, I will recite this prayer, thinking that we want Rinpoche to be here, not just for our sake, not for the sake of the FPMT and its students, but for the sake of all sentient beings who will benefit from his presence in this world. Peerless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Losang father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now. Holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and for mother living beings you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. Lastly, dedicate for all those beings that you're holding in your heart, whoever those beings might be, those that you know, that you are aware of the problems and difficulties that they're going through. And even those that we just know of in a general way, living in parts of the world where there's war and great strife, famine, difficulties, what have you. We can think about those beings being the beneficiary of what we've done tonight, sending this positive energy out to them so it becomes the cause to remove their suffering immediately. And moreover, becomes the cause to give them everything that they need to achieve perfect happiness. Dharma teachings, teachers of that Dharma, all the conducive conditions that will help them on their path. And may all beings have these results through what we have done here tonight. Okay, thank you all, and wish you all a very happy Thanksgiving. We'll meet in 2 weeks, and safe travels, those of you who are traveling, and be well. I'll see you.